No model, no problem. You can still take great self-portraits. Today I'm going to show you exactly how I took these self-portraits and give you a behind-the-scenes look at everything you need to know from the ground up to get started or improve your self-portraits. I'll even break down how to find your own inspiration and let you in on a few of my own editing secrets. Now this one's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Last time I was in front of a camera, that was about 5 years ago. But the good thing in that case is that you probably have more experience in that area than I do. However, I will go over a few poses that I picked up and a few camera techniques to help you put more uses to those tools that you may already have. I'm going to let you know exactly what gear you can use to trigger your camera from a distance, plus some of the mistakes I made and some of the improvements I would make going forward. And finally, I'm going to go through my editing process with you and a few of the techniques that I use to make sure that these photos and the edit come together in the end for a unified vision. But first up, and maybe the most important part of all, where do we find our inspiration? Well, that might start with subscribing to this channel, where you could be hit weekly with creative ways to photograph. Inspiration, or an idea, is the one that a lot of us will struggle with. Today, my idea just started with a location and season. No, like the other season. So we're just coming out of winter here in Finland, and this location is fairly near my house, and it's looking pretty bleak. And you might notice that that's not a complete idea. But my suggestion is to look for part of the idea, not the entire thing, if you are struggling. Find an outfit you want to wear or a song that fits the vibe, and the rest of it will start to follow. I chose this location today based on its fairly diverse landscape, but also this cool feature of a big cross. That led me further down that path of this sort of Southern Gothic aesthetic and this wayward preacher idea. It made me think of this image by Alex Soth, hence the suit in my own images, and this sort of bleakness and black and white imagery of this Amen Ra video, an album cover, and band name Storefront Church, which, side note, is a band I wish always sounded more like their album covers looked. So again, sort of starting with no idea at all. I just had the landscape and the season that we're in, and that started to lead me down the pathway of picking up these other things. Now I'm envisioning TV shows or movies that are helping forward my idea. Songs are coming into mind which sort of fit the vibe. It's also even led me to these very particular things like what I'm going to wear in the photo shoot. And I'm even getting as far ahead as the editing process. What is this photo shoot going to look like? All these things put together, I'm already knowing that this is going to be this really gritty and atmospheric looking shoot, right? So then doing it in full sunlight at midday just wasn't going to work. And for me, that was just as easy enough as to wait for a cloudy day. You can see I have this very overcast day. It is actually around midday. We're at the tail end of winter here in Finland. I knew I could rely on this happening pretty soon, and it was totally worth it. It just wouldn't have been the same going out on this really sunny day. On that day that I woke up and I noticed we had a nice cloudy looking day for the shoot, I intentionally skipped shaving that day and even straightening my hair that morning. These things may sound like really tiny things, but skipping on many of those will eventually all add up, and your photos are going to feel like you didn't fully commit, which is arguably worse than not starting at all. So keep in mind that these examples that I'm going to show you are not edited yet. That might be pretty obvious, but I want to go through the editing process with you first and show you the final results at the end. Here I want to point out a few of my mistakes, which largely were compositional. Obviously, when you're triggering the camera yourself, it's a little bit hard to get that composition right. If I've got the camera in my own hands and I'm looking through the viewfinder, it's very easy to, just take a little bit of a better angle, sit down, take a step forward, whatever it might be that you need to get. When you're triggering it all yourself from your phone or a remote trigger, I was finding that just required a few more attempts than it usually would. And so on that note, what am I using to trigger the camera? In my case, I'm using my phone and the dedicated Fujifilm app, which I would say is not perfect. However, I was quite surprised with the range, how far I could get away from the camera and still have it work, although there were a few connection issues. You can go out and get yourself a piece of hardware, which is a remote trigger. I believe that they work on Bluetooth. I would get one that's dedicated to your camera brand, although as far as I'm aware, a lot of these third-party ones will work with most cameras, assuming assuming that your camera is fairly modern. In these cases where I was getting a little bit more motion, I was lowering my shutter speed to around 50. Of course, then I needed to compensate, lowering my ISO numbers and making my aperture numbers a lot higher. Even though this was a cloudy, overcast day, that can make the sky extremely bright, and it's very easy to blow out those highlights. Probably goes without saying, but having a tripod will help you a lot. Also, just gives you a little bit more accuracy on how you want to frame up your shots. I was making sure in this case that I was moving the tripod around a lot and still experimenting, getting low, angling things up, moving it across completely around the other side. Of course, just experiment, but make sure that even though you don't have the camera in your hands, that you're still moving around. In this case, you're moving around yourself and not another subject. And another thing that might go without saying, but I think it's just easy to forget when it's not you with the camera in your hands, and it's use your environment. Use what's available to you. Use the trees, the grass, the water, whatever that may be around you. I love how I ended up being able to use the sun in these photos here. I think that they turned out great. I know it can be a pain to be coming back down to move the tripod around and all that kind of thing, but just make the effort. It's going to make the photo shoot worth it. As you can see, I don't have so many poses in my pose bank, but I picked up this falling pose from somewhere. I definitely overused it on the day, but it's really effective because it's a great way to show all of your limbs. It gives context, especially if you're a little bit further away from the camera. So definitely steal that one if that's something that you want to go ahead and use. The jumping strategy, especially with a slower shutter speed, can be really effective, or running towards the camera or running across the frame. You can get a little bit more motion in your photos, which can be great. Even though that your camera is on a tripod, you can still get some movement in your photos. There were a few mistakes that I made. Most of them were just compositional, but that's pretty standard even when you have the camera in your own hands. However, the biggest one was probably having the phone in my hand, the thing that was triggering the camera. I did get to a point where I realized that and started dropping the phone into my pocket. I would recommend setting a timer on your trigger so that you have time to do that. Though every now and again, I just sort of forgot, and actually some of the better photos that I took that I might have wanted to use, you can very clearly see my phone in my hand, and I feel like it kind of just ruins the shot. So that's an obvious improvement that I would make going forward, just being aware of that. But probably the biggest improvement that I could make at this point is just extending my pose bank. And some of that I think will just come from having new ideas, having new things to shoot. I can't use all the same poses when the shoot is a completely different vibe. So I think that will happen quite naturally. But I would say that if you want to take self-portraits and you want to make them good, 10 minutes of research online, scrolling through Pinterest, whatever it is, and picking up a few poses that you might want to use yourself and that suit the vibe of the photo shoot that you're going for, that's going to make a world of difference. So now I'd like to go over a bit of the editing process with you. These images are fairly heavily edited, though you might have guessed by now that this photo shoot was fairly conceptual, and I'd like my edit to be a little bit over the top and drive home that mood. When I was editing, I was really kind of going for that True Detective season 1 or maybe even Fight Club, that really green, grainy, muddy kind of look. So I'm going to go over a little bit on how I made that work. Though if you're still watching at this point, I kind of feel like I owe you one a little bit, and I'm actually just going to put these two presets, the color and the black and white, up over on my website. It's going to be free to download. You don't have to enter your email or anything like that. And if you have Lightroom, you can just put it straight in and apply that directly to your photos. And while you're there at macintoshphoto.com, I would recommend checking out some of the other stuff. If you're interested, there are some prints and some t-shirts available for purchase. Otherwise, there's a ton of stuff on the blog already that will be able to help you, including some other free Lightroom presets. So go ahead, check those out, make use of all the information that you can get. Outside of the presets, some things that I did consider when I was editing this photo shoot that I haven't applied to the final images, but are definitely an option, is grain. Grain I've been avoiding for quite many years now. It was very popular quite a few years ago. I feel like when you edit digitally, it just feels a little bit dated at this point, although in these really conceptual shoots, I do feel it still has a place. What I would do is just apply it very lightly. You almost kind of don't want to recognize that it's even there, which applies to a lot of the editing practices, but like I say, in these more conceptual shoots where it gets a little bit more creative, it is fun to play around with some heavier edits. So do as you will. I would apply it lightly, maybe in the 10 or 20 like I do here, and you almost don't notice it, but it will just add this little bit extra of seasoning. The other one that I did consider, and I think most people are fairly well aware of at this point, is just pushing the bottom of your curves up like this. Make sure you've got a couple of placeholder markers there so it doesn't shift anything else around, and it's going to give you this sort of faded film look. This you can kind of go a little bit too crazy on as well maybe, but again, this is a conceptual shoot, it's a creative shoot, do as you will. Usually, these days especially, I'm erring on the side of less is more. If you've got any questions about the editing process, just leave them in the comments below and I'll get back to you individually. And so with all that being said, let's get into the images that I thought were best and their finalized edits. So I forgot to film an outro at home, I'm just doing a quick one on my phone here. But if you enjoyed the video, please do leave a like, subscribe, comment, let me know if you want to see more of this self-portrait stuff. I had a lot of fun doing it, so I hope you enjoyed watching it and maybe learned something. Otherwise, there's loads more photography related stuff you can go and check out on the channel. Until next time, happy creating, peace.